All right, let's set the scene. Imagine this. It's 1998. Brazil decides to sell off its entire national telephone system. We're talking one of the biggest privatizations in history, over $19 billion changing hands in a single day. The government basically took a state monopoly, shattered it into pieces, and invited the whole world to come and fight over them. But in that massive scramble, who really came out on top? Well, the answer probably isn't who you'd think, and it reveals this incredible story about strategy, about bouncing back from crisis, and really about how an underdog can outsmart the giants. So on one side, you had the heavyweights, Spain's Telefonica and Mexico's América Móvil. They showed up with huge piles of cash and a ton of power in the region. And then there was the underdog, Telecom Italia Mobile, or TIM. They started with literally nothing in Brazil. No customers, no cell towers, no brand recognition. Zip. And somehow, they spun that massive disadvantage into their greatest weapon. So how on earth did they do it? Well, it all kicked off with a very unlikely bet. A bet on technology that would end up defining the entire market for the next 20 years. You see, back in the early 2000s, Brazil's mobile industry was at a fork in the road. The whole market was split between two different tech standards, and the choice an operator made right then was going to have huge, huge consequences down the line. Now, the safe choice was CDMA. That was the American standard, and it was pretty good for voice calls. But TIM, with its European DNA, they made a different, much riskier bet. They went with GSM. And here's the key. They weren't just picking a technology. They were picking an entire global ecosystem that was about to explode. And wow, did that bet pay off. Just look at this timeline. In 2002, TIM launched the very first national GSM network in Brazil. Meanwhile, their competitors were stuck on CDMA and eventually had to spend billions of dollars just to switch over. And then, the knockout punch. The smartphone arrived. And guess what network it was built for? GSM. TIM was ready and waiting. Everyone else was scrambling to catch up. But look, having the best tech doesn't mean a thing if people can actually use it. So TIM's next move was a masterstroke in scale, taking on the absolutely massive challenge of covering a country the size of a continent. And get this, by 2002, the very same year they launched their GSM network, TIM did something no one else had even attempted. They achieved 100% national coverage. They were in every single one of Brazil's states. While their bigger rivals were busy defending their home turf, TIM just went everywhere. And this nationwide network was so much more than just a bunch of towers. It was a powerful, competitive moat. It meant they instantly had a national brand. It meant they could go after huge corporate contracts that required coast-to-coast coverage. And they even made money when their rivals' customers had to roam onto their network. Just a brilliant move. So with this strong foundation in place, TIM launched this killer product that just took the market by storm. But here's the twist. That incredible success led them straight into a crisis that nearly brought the whole company down. It was a plan called Infinity, and the idea was totally revolutionary at the time. Instead of paying by the minute, you just paid a small flat fee for each call, no matter how long you talked. People loved it, it completely changed how people use their phones, and it put a crushing strain on their network. And that strain led to this number, 8.1 million. In 2012, a bombshell report from regulators alleged that TIM was intentionally dropping 8.1 million calls in a single day. Why? To force customers on that Infinity plan to call back and pay the flat fee all over again. The damage to their reputation was just catastrophic. So how do you come back from something like that? It wasn't about a clever ad campaign. It was about deep, painful, structural change. Regulators banned them from selling new lines. So TIM had to commit to a massive 20 billion real investment, completely overhaul its corporate governance, and this is a big one, they voluntarily joined the Novo Mercado, putting themselves under Brazil's strictest rules for transparency. But here's the funny thing. That period of crisis, all that forced investment, it had this completely unexpected side effect. It created a culture of extreme efficiency. It basically forged an engineering advantage that would become their calling card. Just look at this. For most of the 4G era, TIM had way less spectrum, the radio waves that carry all our data, than its main rivals. And the telecom world, that's like showing up to a Formula One race with a smaller engine. You're just at a huge disadvantage. And yet, This was the results. Even with less spectrum, TIM consistently delivered the best 4G availability in the country. That means their customers could get a 4G signal more often than anyone else's. It's absolute proof that their engineers had learned to squeeze more performance out of less, a skill their richer rivals never had to develop. This culture of discipline wasn't just in their engineering, it was in their corporate strategy too. In 2014, they tried to buy a competitor, Oi. Regulators said no. Instead of forcing it, they just waited. And when Oi eventually went bankrupt, TIM was right there, ready to lead a deal that added over 14 million new customers. That's what 7 years of patience gets you. So what happens when this super efficient, incredibly patient, engineering-driven underdog finally gets to compete on a level playing field? Well, you get the 5G rollout. For the first time in its entire history, at the 2021 5G auction, TIM had the resources to go toe-to-toe with the giants. They could buy just as much spectrum as anyone else. That resource gap was finally closed. And the result was immediate and absolutely stunning. The company that had spent decades learning how to do more with less was finally unleashed. Soon, they had 5G in almost 1,100 cities. That's over 50% more than their nearest competitor. They didn't just compete, they blew right past everyone. So let's just break down TIM's winning formula. First, it was that deep-rooted culture of engineering excellence. They were forced to build the most efficient network out of necessity, and that skill became an unbeatable advantage when things finally leveled out. And second, it was this unique blend of strategic patience and rock-solid governance. After that terrible crisis, they made transparency their superpower, becoming the only telecom on Brazil's highest standard of governance. And that built a kind of trust with regulators and investors that you just can't buy. And that really brings us to the core lesson here. TIM Brasil's story proves that winning isn't always about having the most customers. Sometimes building a durable, disciplined, and technically superior company from third place is actually the smarter, more sustainable way to win. Which leaves us with this one last thought. In a market packed with giants, how does the number 3 player become the one that sets the technology standard for everyone else? Well, TIM's story gives us the playbook. It's about smart bets, discipline forged in crisis, and the patience to play the long game. It's how the underdog not only survives, but ends up leading the pack.